Hey y'all, Alex here at your home of the Music Deep Dive, and today it is time for another record collection update. We are in June 2025. It's hard to believe 2025 is already almost halfway over. The statistic that I saw the other day that put this period of time into perspective for me is that we are now closer to the year 2050 than we are the year 2000, which is pretty wild, to put it mildly. So time passes by quickly, and so before we know it, here we are, another batch of records acquired and another opportunity to talk about them. So let's dive right on in. Now, these were, I will say, for the most part, acquired over a broader period of time, I think, than the last few record collection updates. So I guess if there's a positive spin to put on it, there is that. But nevertheless, a reasonable crop of them that we will go through in a timely fashion. So first of all, the first record in this list here is actually a gift that I was sent by a friend of mine who works at a record shop. I had mentioned in the context of talking about the White Stripes and Jack White, my most recent discography ranking on the channel, I mentioned that at the time, Boarding House Reach was the only Jack White record that I owned on vinyl. And my friend, who was a massive Jack White fan, was personally offended by this, I think is the correct verbiage, as Boarding House Reach is not one of his favorite Jack White projects. So he very kindly sent me this, White Blood Cells, the band's third LP. And if you watch the Jack White ranking, you know one of my favorite Jack White / White Stripes projects for sure. Really the one that kind of broke them into mainstream relevance after slowly picking up steam in the underground over their first two records. And yeah, really great record. Really pleased to have it in the collection. And after, going through their stuff and gaining this new appreciation for White and the Stripes and some of these other side projects even, I'm really excited to gradually invest more and more in kind of expanding my Jack White collection. And I suppose I am grateful in some sense that Boarding House Reach is no longer my only White LP in the collection, although the memes of that were definitely fun while they lasted. So happy to own that. Definitely gonna try to check out some of his other stuff. Like I almost got No Name the other week in a record store. I almost pulled the trigger on that, but not quite. But soon enough. We're sticking to pretty topical stuff here. I had been eyeing this record on vinyl for a long time, probably like a year or two, and there were a couple of record store trips where I had it in my stack and I ended up just putting it back just because there were other records I wanted to prioritize. But after doing a proper discography dive, finally I had no excuses. So Yankee Hotel Foxtrot by Wilco is finally in the collection. Got this thing used online for a decent price. I think I spent like $20 on it or something like that, which is pretty good. It is, unwrapped, obviously, so you can actually see the gatefold here. This is I think this is the pressing they did like 5 years ago or something like that. I don't remember the exact year offhand, but really, really good shape. Like one of the corners is maybe a little bit bent, but otherwise really, really good condition. Yeah, I mean, watch the Wilco video, of course, to get a sense of what my thoughts are on Yankee Hotel Foxtrot, but it's a superb record. It's a stellar album, and one that it was a first listen love type of thing when I first heard it, but exploring their catalog in totality for the first time a couple months back was eye-opening in the sense of putting that record into perspective and really expanding my appreciation of it. So this has been the Wilco record of choice that I've been jamming the most frequently. So I'm really excited to own that, and I'm really excited to get into collecting some of their other stuff and some of the Uncle Tupelo and Sunvolt stuff Although some of that stuff is very hard to find on vinyl for whatever reason. Like Uncle Tupelo, I want to say the only record that you can get pretty easily on vinyl is their last one. And Sunvolt, it's just kind of hit or miss as far as which ones are available, but I've never seen a vinyl copy of Trace like ever. So I don't know. Sounds like a good opportunity for a reissue, especially since we're in 30th anniversary territory here. But that's just me. Of course, had to talk about this one. This is another very topical one. Matt Berninger Gets Sunk, the second solo record from the National frontman. I did a review of this about a couple weeks ago. And yeah, really, really good album. Great album, honestly. One that I do prefer in a number of aspects to the first solo record, Serpentine Prison. I just think the band here sounds more cohesive and like a band. It sounds a bit more smaller scale than Serpentine Prison, which is a bit more sweeping in its ambition. And I think there's some really great softer tracks on here, but there's some great upbeat stuff as well. Like, of course, Bonnet Pins, the lead single, which is as close to like a classic National sounding track as Berninger has put out in a hot minute. Yeah, really great record, and really cool, of course, to see Berninger live at First Avenue and get that experience. I mean, getting to hear those songs in a live setting and having that be my first impression of them before even hearing the studio record was a really cool thing. And it inspired me to revisit some other National stuff. There will be a National video at some point coming out, almost assuredly, because I've been checking out their stuff a lot more, and really having some of the records that haven't stuck with me historically really grow on me over time. And it did inspire me to make a couple of National related investments. I have one of them here, which is actually Serpentine Prison, Matt's first solo record. And yeah, I've spent a lot more time with this one lately. And again, I don't like it quite as much as Get Sunk, but I still think this is really good. I think it's a little bit easily forgotten about because the tracks, as I said, it's a larger ensemble. So the tracks are a little bit like, I don't know what the wording is that I'm trying to think of, but they're not as immediate as even some of the more recent National records are, I would say. Like, in a sense, I think it sort of is setting the canvas for the sort of beige production that something like First Two Pages of Frankenstein has, and that people have gripes about. But I still think there's an interesting character here. There are moments where Berninger is getting into, like, jazzier territory and things like that. I think the atmosphere that Booker T. Jones, as kind of the executive producer of this record, is capturing here is really interesting. And yeah, I think it has its own identity, kind of separate from Get Sunk and separate from the National stuff a little bit too. Again, it's not a super energetic release. It doesn't have the same moments of bombast and intensity that something like Get Sunk does, but there's some really good songs on there, like the title track, Distant Axis is another one that's really good on that record. So some quality stuff and worth checking out for any National fans out there for sure. Okay. I have a 2025 record, another one here. This is Ken Yates, Total Cinema. As you can see here, this is an autograph copy. I got this off of his website. Ken Yates is a name who I've been trying to turn people on to for a little while now in some of the communities and telling friends about him in some of the communities that I'm in. He is a Canadian singer-songwriter who's put out a couple of records. I like his record from a couple of years ago, Cerulean, very solid kind of folk singer-songwriter record. And this one, I think, is even better than that one. I discovered him just by chance because actually Katie Pruitt, who I'm a big fan of, had gotten really into in the last 6 months, posted one of his new songs on her Instagram story, I think. And that was the track Cataclysmic End. And I checked that song out, and that shit is an earworm. I love it. It's probably my most listened to song of 2025 so far. And number 2 might honestly be Perennials from this same record, another single of his. So it's just really sharp songwriting. It's not an ambitious record in the sense of like, there's not like super unique or inventive like production techniques kind of backing everything here. It's a record where the songs kind of stand on their own and they have sharp hooks. I think Yates as a lyricist has an interesting like introspective quality to him, but he's also not too self-serious. He has a lot of wit as well. And when you combine that introspectiveness and wit with these melodies that are really delightful across the whole thing, I think this is just stacked with interesting melodic ideas. And the electric guitar sounds on here I think are really cool as well. It's just really strong. It's really satisfying. And no matter if it doesn't reinvent the wheel, I still get a lot out of it. I still think it's a really enjoyable record. Lots of great tunes on here. And absolutely worth, as I said, really worth your time checking out. This would be my favorite record that I've heard so far in 2025 out of the 12, 15 probably records that I've gotten to hear so far. Were it not for Sable Fable existing. But I don't think playing second fiddle to Bon Iver is something that anyone should be upset about. This is a great record, really worth checking it out. And again, if you do check it out, support him on Bandcamp or on his website. I didn't even know that was going to be autographed when it came over. So that was a nice little surprise. All right. A couple of these records are going to be teasers for the next kind of discography dive videos that I'm going to be doing. So I'm going to hold my tongue a little bit when talking about some of these. But let's start with this one. Paul Simon, So Beautiful or So What, his record from 2011. Yeah, so the next discography dive videos, which might come out next week if all goes according to plan, will be sort of similar to the Uncle Tupelo, Sunvolt, Wilco series. Will be a series on Simon and Garfunkel, as well as individual videos on Paul Simon's solo career and Art Garfunkel's solo career. Because people talk about Simon as a solo artist, but no one talks about Garfunkel. So we'll see if that is fair or not when we get there. But Paul Simon, I got to see him live in late April. Absolutely fantastic show. Really knocked my socks off in a way that I wasn't expecting. Just so captivating. Very engaging performer and in better voice than I was expecting. And hearing both his most recent material being played live and some of his older stuff as well, both hits and some more deeper cuts. It was just really fascinating, really great, really spectacular show. So getting to hear his solo catalog again was really nice. And this record, again, without saying too much about it, is really strong, as many of his late career records are. I think one thing that is a takeaway that I will use, I suppose, as a teaser for the video is that Paul Simon's later career, I think, stands up with just about any late career stage of any major recording artist from like the 60s and 70s. Like as far as major recording artists who have made it to around the age that Paul Simon is, like still making music in the 2010s in his 60s, 70s, 80s, that sort of thing. I think Paul Simon is still as inventive as it gets and still as sharp of a songwriter as it gets and still experimenting with different ideas. And to me, I think So Beautiful or So What is as exemplary, as strong of an example of that as pretty much any of his records from that era are. So I'll keep it at that for now. But yeah, really enjoyed that one. And then it was a little bit out of order down there, but I'm also going to talk about this one, his most recent record, 7 Psalms, which I did not own yet, so I made sure to get that one as well. Again, in the live show that he was doing, he starts, and I think he's still touring it now, at least at a few more gigs. I could be wrong about that. But 7 Psalms, the record, is the first half of the concert, the first act, if you will. He plays the entire record live straight through with a live band. And I like this record or I do. I liked it when I first heard it, but hearing this material where he's reflecting on age and mortality and spirituality and that sort of thing, hearing that in a live setting and being able to see him perform this type of material in front of you was kind of a mind fuck. It was, I I don't like this record as much as, like, let's say David Bowie's Black Star or Leonard Cohen's You Want It Darker, for instance, right? I don't like this record as much as either of those two, but imagine getting to hear Bowie perform the Black Star material live. Imagine hearing Leonard Cohen play You Want It Darker live before they passed away. Imagine how, like, unbelievable of an experience that would be. How, grounding, sobering in many ways, because you're seeing someone confront their mortality right in front of you. But also just how transcendent that an experience that would be at the same time, because it's just, you don't really get to hear that and experience that too much on any level, whether that's in a musical setting or whether that's people just confronting their mortality head on in day-to-day life. You don't hear that. You don't experience that. So this was incredible live, and it absolutely increased my appreciation of this record beyond what it already was. So again, without saying too much about the contents of it beyond that, just know that the live show was incredible. If he is still touring as of my recording this video, if he still does have gigs, highly recommend checking him out. And I'm really happy, so beyond grateful that I had the opportunity to see him. One of the great songwriters of all time, without question. Okay, so this is kind of funny because I talked about this record, I think even in my last video, or maybe the one before that at this point, I don't remember. But there's another copy of it that I've found. Actually, my sister found this in the wild and actually got it for me, so shout out to her. But here is the White Album. This is my third copy of the White Album that I have on vinyl, and like the last one that I got, you can kind of make it out here. It is a numbered Jacksonville pressing, so second pressing from '68, numbered. I have sort of made it a little bit of an unofficial goal / meme that if I see these types of numbered original pressings, second pressings of the White Album in the wild, that I will try to get them if I run into them. That hasn't been a 100% thing because I'm pretty sure I just saw one in the wild the other week and I opted not to get it at that point because I was getting a little bit over the top. But it's a cool artifact. It's a cool little collector's curio, I think, a little interesting little niche. I was hearing, I think it was Steve Albini talking about it in a podcast appearance thing that he did not long before he died, and he mentioned some guy whose like whole mission is like collecting as many copies of the White Album as he possibly can, and I think that's a little bit of the inspiration there. So we'll see if it ends up extending beyond the 3 copies that I currently own, but again, it's one of the best albums of all time, one of my favorite albums of all time, so, can't have too many copies of it. At least I would say so. Okay, couple of some more recent additions, and again, stuff that is directly connected to discography rankings. This is cool. So this is Father John Misty, Chloe, and the Next 20th Century. So at this point, I have almost every single Father John Misty record. The only one that I don't have is his debut, Fear Fun. And I don't have any like Jay Tillman stuff on vinyl or on CD for that matter, I don't think. But, Chloe, Chloe's a great record. All of his stuff is great, I think. And I really, really love this one. But a lot of other people aren't as crazy about it. So this is something that you see in clearance sections a lot. And I actually got this at a Barnes & Noble for 50% off, as you can see. And I don't remember if it was some deal or something going on, or if it had to do with like the Barnes & Noble membership that I have or whatever, but it ended up being discounted even more than that. So I got this, sealed copy of Chloe in the Next 20th Century for a whopping $5, which is pretty cool, and a record that's definitely, I think, worth at least somewhat more than that, if you ask me. Yeah, I mean, it's Father John Misty pivoting into, more so traditional vocal pop settings and that sort of thing, almost jazzy at points. And I still don't think it's quite as much of a detour, quite as much of a left turn as some people think it is. I feel like that's a common theme that comes up in these videos at this point, is me talking about how something is not as much of a left turn as people think it is, because usually I think people tend to overreact about those things. Still very tied into the same songwriting style that Tillman was doing with his previous projects. Still very much tied into a very 70s ethos, I think. But the songs are so strong. I love the title track. Goodbye, Mr. Blue, Funny Girl, The Next 20th Century, We Could Be Strangers. Just so many great songs on there. Yeah. Now we only have Fear Fun left, and I'm sure that'll be in the collection before too long, and then we will be complete on Mr. John Misty, who I'm also going to be seeing in concert later this year. I'll be seeing him in October, so I'm really excited about that. That'll be a blast. Okay, we have Joan Baez next, so another person I've done videos for. Got a couple of her records pretty cheap at Cheapo Records over here. This is Blown Away, from 77, if I'm not mistaken. Not one of her better records. It contains her worst song, Time Rag. But another artist where, her stuff is actually like pretty easy to find in used places for the most part. So I'm kind of just trying to start picking up like some of her 60s and 70s stuff casually, like as I see them around. And there's still some good tunes on here. It's just, again, her last two records from the 70s before she went on this extended period in between labels just are not there from a material standpoint, if you ask me anyways. Now, that said, I also got Gulf Winds, her record before that, which, if you watched my Joan Baez video, this is one of my favorite records of hers, and a record that I think is massively underrated in the grand scheme of things. I think it sounds of its time. I think the production, one could argue, maybe has not aged super well, but I think the core songs on here are really, really good, especially when you take into account that Baez is writing all the songs here, which is, again, a topic that is unique to her whole discography. There's no other record in her catalog where she writes every single song. And in that sense, I think it's a valuable record, and it's a record that proves that Baez had merit as a songwriter in a lot of ways. So lots of great songs. Seabirds is great. I like Caruso a lot. Still Waters at Night. And then the title track on the B-side is like amazing kind of longer freeform kind of sort of story song there. Really great stuff. Again, highly recommend checking this out. If you've heard like Diamonds and Rust and you really like Diamonds and Rust, I would recommend like giving this record a fair chance. I'm not saying you will enjoy it as much as Diamonds and Rust. I'm kind of one of those rare people who does, but I still think it's worthwhile. All right. So continuing on the national theme from earlier, I'm slowly trying to acquire the remainder of their catalog. And so here we have I Am Easy to Find from 2019. Again, there's going to be a video on them coming out, so I don't want to spoil all my thoughts. But what I'll say is the national show that I saw, the Matt Berninger show I saw, I should say, they, in the encore, played a few different songs, but they played one national song, which was the track Light Years, which is the closing track off of this record. And I'm Easy to Find is not an album that has ever been like among my favorite national records. It's a hard nut to crack, I think, in some ways. It's the most, I think, abstract record that they've ever put out. And I think it's a record that causes the audience's footing to be a little bit unsteady because it's throwing so much at you, whether that's tracks with very different sonic ideas or lyrical ideas than what they're going for before. Maybe it's the heavy interpolation of female vocalists, which changes the timbre of things and the atmosphere of things a little bit. There's just so much going on that I think I've always struggled with this one more compared to a lot of their other records, which are a bit more immediate. But hearing Light Years live, a song that I've always liked, but for whatever reason, I had never latched onto in that way that you just do with songs. Hearing it live, flipped that switch for me. And it's caused me to revisit this record a lot more in the couple of weeks since then. And now I'm at the point where this very well could be one of my favorite national records now. This record has clicked finally for me in a way that I've always wanted it to. But yeah, I love pretty much everything here. And I love the experimentation of it. I think you get to hear Bryce Dessner's like production and arrangement ideas in particular in an interesting way that I don't think any other national record allows him to explore with in the same way. He doesn't stretch his legs or doesn't get to stretch his legs as much. So hard to say. Like, I genuinely have no idea where this will come out in a ranking because, spoiler alert, most of the national discography I absolutely adore. So it's going to be tough. It's going to be interesting, and I suspect that some of the opinions that I have will piss some people off, which is fine. But yeah, I'm easy to find. Great record. And if there's one takeaway that I want you to have before going into that national video, if you've struggled with that record compared to others, it's really worth a revisit. It's a record that absolutely rewards repeated listenings and just digging into it in a real, firm, and calculated way. Okay, we're almost at the close here. I have yet to listen to this record, but I can speak to it a little bit because this is also connected to the Matt Berninger concert. So the backing band that was playing with Matt Berninger, that also does like the backing stuff on Get Sunk, consists of a group of different session musicians, one of them being a musician named Julia Laws, who also has a solo project named Ron Boy. And the Ron Boy project was who opened up the concert for Berninger, which basically was Matt Berninger's backing band opening up the concert, but with Julia Laws as the lead singer, playing bass guitar, and it's all her songs that she's writing. And so this is the one studio record that Ron Boy has put out. This is Pity to Love, which came out in 2022. I got this I ended up getting this off of Bandcamp rather than at the venue because I'd already gotten the Berninger record and the CD at the venue, and my arms were full at that point. But yeah, as I said, I haven't heard the studio versions of these songs yet, so I can't comment on them, but live they were quite good. The band themselves, of course, was fantastic. And I think Laws as a songwriter and as a musician, I'm trying to think of how I would describe her stuff. Definitely indie rock, but with a little bit of a sort of punkier edge at points. There's definitely softer tracks, like Oceans of Emotions. Oceans of Emotion is one that I remember being a little bit more reserved at points. But you have that punkier edge. In some ways, it actually, like, the textures of it gave me pseudo, like, shoegaze vibes, I suppose, in the sense of you have these very, like, loud and aggressive instrumentals a lot of the time, but she as a singer is just kind of floats over everything. She has a very kind of light and not breathy voice, but soft enough. And so it creates this very kind of like ethereal vibe, even amidst all the energy of everything else. So I was captivated by that. It was genuinely a really cool experience to see them live. I believe there's another Ron Boy record coming out potentially this year. So be sure to check that out. And again, be sure to support your independent artists that you're aware of, and be sure to show up for the damn openers, right? Like, I think I made the same point in the Matt Berninger review, but show up for the opening acts, because it's worth it. It means you get better seats at the concert a lot of the time, or better viewing experience. And, you know, this is a period of time, as it always is, where it's important to show up for artists and show up to show your support for them and show them that their work is valued and that people feel compelled to show up and listen to them and pay them attention. I saw this tweet, actually, not to tangent too much, but I saw this tweet the other day, from yesterday, or maybe even earlier today at this point, where it was an author who would come to a bookstore to do like a book signing or something like that, in some big like book event, and no one showed up. And so she posted this like selfie of her, like almost like trying to hold back like tears, with this like empty bookstore. And I can't imagine how discouraging that must be. And I can't imagine, as like an independent musician, how discouraging it must be to be like a concert opener, especially if it's like there's multiple people on the bill, you're the first person out, and like the main act doesn't come out for another 3 to 4 hours. I can't imagine how discouraging it must feel to play for an empty room, or a nearly empty room, or a room that maybe is somewhat filled with people, but most of them are just not paying your music any attention, right? I get it's probably part of the business and a lot of people are used to it, but I can imagine it's discouraging. So bottom line is, try to show up for the openers when you can, as much as you possibly can. I have a concert that I'm going to in a few weeks, potentially, where I have a 3-hour drive over to the actual concert itself, and I'm probably doing a 3-hour drive back that night. So there's a whole bunch of like logistical things that make it very inconvenient for me to get there to see the opening act for this concert. But I'm going to try my damnedest to make it work, because even if I don't know the opener in question, it's important to show up. It's important to be there. It's important to show your support, and presence in and of itself sometimes is the most effective form of support that you can provide. So anyways, that is my tangent of that. And check out that Ron Boy record. I do look forward to eventually checking out the studio LP, as I said. And we're going to close this video with I think, honestly, a lot of these records are really cool, and I'm super happy to have them in my collection. But this is the big one here that I'm saving for last. Just came over the other day. And a record that I actually wasn't really sure I was going to get my hands on, to tell you the truth, because it was a limited run, only 3,000 copies as far as I'm aware. And when I placed the order through Interscope Records, I honestly thought, well, you know, they'll probably just email me back saying my order's been canceled or something like that. But they didn't. I have it here. It's a little bit bent, which I'm sad about, in the corners, but otherwise no complaints here. And that is Elliott Smith Figure 8. This is the 25th anniversary deluxe edition on 45 RPM LP colored splatter vinyl. And I haven't dug into the thing yet, but if you see the designs out there, it's this kind of black and red splatter design. I'm not that crazy about colored and design vinyl records. I think they're cool, but I don't go out of my way to acquire them. But this is genuinely like one of the cooler designs out there. I mean, again, from a color palette standpoint, it's basically the Figure 8 mural, but formatted as a splatter vinyl. As I said, this was released through Interscope in a limited run of 3,000 copies. And I already owned Figure 8. I bought Figure 8 several years ago when it was like really hard to find. I think I spent way too much money in hindsight to get it. But the deluxe edition of Figure 8 contains some fantastic songs in their own right. And historically, I think it had only been like a streaming exclusive type of thing. I don't think it had been put out on CD before. I could be wrong about that. But the deluxe edition of Figure 8 contains the title track, which is the cover of the song from the Schoolhouse Rock kind of educational TV series, which is really beautiful. A Living Will and I Can't Answer For You Anymore, which are both really cool songs, demos, and like alternate versions of some of the tracks on the record. And then it closes with the Elliott Smith cover of Because by the Beatles, which is a stunning cover, like so ridiculously beautiful, so well done. One of my favorite Elliott Smith recordings in general. And again, any time that I want to direct people to see like how influenced Elliott was by the Beatles, I mean, that's the cover I point them to. Because not only is it a great cover, but it's a cover done by someone who clearly understands the assignment and understands the original arrangement. So, yeah, the deluxe edition tracks are excellent. Seeing the opportunity to have them on vinyl, couldn't pass it up. And it wasn't quite as expensive as I was fearing, as I've seen some other similar sets go for. So, it is what it is. It does look like, according to the Interscope website, there are a few copies left from when I last checked earlier today. So if you want to get your hands on this special copy and be one of those lucky 3,000 people, it does look like there's still an opportunity to do so. So be sure to check that out. But yeah, Figure 8 is a spectacular record, and whenever I do an Elliott Smith discography ranking, I will wax poetic, nostalgic, wax enthusiastic about it in more detail. But absolutely one of my favorite Elliott Smith records, and really honestly one of my favorite albums of all time. But that's a topic for another day. So those are all the records that I've acquired since the last record haul video from a couple months ago. So curious to know what you think about any of the records that I talked about, what records you managed to acquire over the last couple of months or so. I am, again, I keep saying this, that I'm going to try to scale things back a little bit. I've got a busy summer coming up, so trying to modulate my spending a little bit and try to reallocate it in ways that are appropriate. So we'll see if it ends up panning out this time. But in any case, really happy to have all these records and really excited to have more musical topics, more music videos to come out on the channel coming up here. So with that, thanks so much for watching. Please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. As always, more videos are to come. Several discography rankings in the pipeline, as I have alluded to. Make sure to hit that bell for notifications and tell a friend as well. It really helps out. Thanks a lot. And I will see you next time, right here at your home of the Music Deep Dive.